And I am done. So I just finished up reading A Time of Dread by John Gwynne. I wanted to give you my initial thoughts upon finishing the book, which was just now. So I thought this was a very good book. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I hesitated between giving it 5 stars, but I felt like there were a few things in the book that I really couldn't get past, and that I felt like it was a step back from some of the other John Gwynne books that I've read. I've mentioned recently that John Gwynne is turning into my favorite author, and I still think that's true. Every book that I've read of his up until this point, which was 6 books, the Faithful and the Fallen series and the Bloodsworn saga, I've given them all 5 out of 5 stars. So, I personally am a little disappointed that I had to give this a 4.5 stars, but 4.5 stars is extremely good. So it wasn't like I didn't like the book. I love the book. So, I want to say from the start that it's got to be really hard for an author to write a book in the same world using a time jump, especially a book like this. This has been a successful thing that Joe Abercrombie has done in the First Law series, but the First Law series is kind of a broad, open, political world where you could write any number of stories and make it work. And The Faithful and the Fallen, the entire premise of these books is a good versus evil, kind of a gods aspect. And that has to be the central plot of the next series as well, because that's the only major conflict that this world undergoes. If you wrote a Song of Ice and Fire style political drama in this world, it wouldn't fit at all, especially after the first series. So to write a series using the same central premise and have it work is a notable accomplishment, because you have to make it somehow a blend of different enough to not feel like a ripoff and similar enough to share those common themes from what made the first one so successful. And so, hats off to John Gwynne for successfully accomplishing that. I struggled with the first 3/4 of this book. It wasn't bad, but I kept thinking and comparing it to the Faithful and the Fallen series. And by that point in the Faithful and the Fallen series, I was all in, knowing that I loved this book. It had a much bigger world. There's this beautiful map at the beginning of each of these books, and it's this sprawling world. And in the first book, you had characters from all over the world, kind of doing that Song of Ice and Fire thing, where they're bringing in all these different storylines that are going to converge at some point later in the story. In these books, really, the central plot happens on a very small portion of this world map. There's 3 different main characters, and they all live relatively close to each other. And so you're already feeling at that point like, man, this doesn't feel as epic of a story. Meanwhile, you don't feel like the story is of epic proportions either, because you're really unsure about what's going on. In the first book, it felt very like this gods are gonna battle, the true end of the world is coming, and it is good versus evil, and we're in it. We have these saviors and these huge battle scenes that are going to happen. In this one, it felt as if it was way smaller in scale, where the bad guys are some random henchmen from the bad guy side, and it's like, where are we going with this story? Now, the last quarter of the book is one of the best endings of a book that I've ever read. The plot gets flipped on its head. You get that huge epic nature of the story. Everything comes to an aggressive, intense finale that makes me hungrier for this next book than I've been in a long time. I'm more excited to read this next book than I was to read any of the Faithful and the Fallen books. And so, the ending of the book gets a 10 out of 5. It really, really rocked it. I can't get over the moments that happened on all 3 of these character storylines. All shocked me in different ways. I love being shocked as a reader, and this book really successfully did that in a fair way. So I cannot wait to read these next book. It was a slow burn, though. It took a while to get into it. So if you get into this series, I have a couple recommendations. One is, I've read a lot of people that say that you can read this series before The Faithful and the Fallen. No, don't do it. You're going to ruin The Faithful and the Fallen, and it will it explains the ending of The Faithful and the Fallen at the beginning of this book. You don't want that to happen to you. It might be interesting on one hand to read it out of order because you'd already know what happens and you fill in that backstory that you've needed, but it would be so much better to read this in published order. The second piece of advice I give you is don't judge this book by the first 3/4 of it. Stick through it. Finish the book. You will not regret pushing through it. It is a wonderful conclusion. So, yeah, I'm going to keep this review a little bit short. Really like this book. Can't wait for the next one, and I hope you read it as well. Thanks for watching.